President Trump declared the opioid crisis a public health emergency. Do you agree with him? Is there an agenda being served? The Monica Perez Show starts now. This is Monica Perez, your libertarian voice on News 95.5 and AM 750 WSB, sometimes Saturday 3 to 6, sometimes Sunday 1 to 3. It all depends. Today, it is Sunday 1 to 3. I am live. You can call. We're going to talk about this opioid crisis. I'm kind of going to let people call with their own experiences and insights, although I've got a lot to say, especially from a libertarian perspective. The number's 404-872-0750, 1-800-WSB-TALK. You could tweet at me at Monica Perez Show. So Trump declared in a speech this week that the opioid crisis is a public health emergency. And any suggested, I read the document from the White House website, and the solutions or the actions that are going to take place are kind of your typical stuff. Nothing really earth-shattering, moving money around, streamlining processes, maybe injecting more money. I didn't really dig into what maybe some of those things were leading towards, although if you do a little bit of your own research, there seems to be money for drug companies at the end of that rainbow. I don't know. I haven't dug into it that way yet. Because as a libertarian, what I tend to do is I don't look at policy solutions to problems before I take a step back and ask the question if there are policies that are creating this problem. And I think it's probably safe to say that anyone who calls himself a libertarian is against the drug war for number one, for the reason that you are making a personal choice to use drugs or not to use drugs, even to sell drugs or to buy drugs, and that it's none of the government's business to use force to interfere with that. For me, I would even take it one step further and say that the drug war is counterproductive, that or that the government itself creates, actually contributes to the dependency, that it's the fact that it's a black market for drugs that creates the violence, that Merck, when Merck sells drugs, it's a legitimate company. There's no violence attached, because if they put something wrong in their pills, that would be fraud, which is a crime. If somebody doesn't pay them, they can sue them or attach their assets. They have recourse with the courts. They don't have to break their legs. And in the competitive environment, the government doesn't come in and take Merck away and lock it up in jail so that the other companies fight for the corners. It's the black market that creates the violence. And I think that is a common focus for libertarians analyzing the issue. But I would say there's another element to it, which I think is more serious, that doesn't get as much attention. And that is, in my opinion, and I think it's probably evident to anybody who's really close to the problem, that the government is the greatest enabler of drugs probably in the world. Not just the back alley, Iran-Contra or CIA crack stuff that Gary Webb revealed in his book Dark Alliance, which I believe he died for revealing, but that there's all that nefarious stuff behind the scenes. But as far as just the enabling element of it, the drug problem is much worse, I believe, because we have a welfare state. And I think a great example, or an easier to understand example, is if you ever watch a show, I found it fascinating a couple of times, but it's really sad, so I don't watch it too much. But it's called My 600-Pound Life. And you watch these people who are extremely obese, and I think a lot of them are trying to get gastric bypass surgery or whatever, but you see their lives, and you see that they cannot work. They can't even procure their own food, so they always have an enabler, a family member, whatever, who brings them food. But it's a lot of food, and they tend, it always seems to me they're on the poor side, if not really poor. And you can't help but wonder, where are they getting all the money for the food? And where is their family getting the money for the food? And are their families working like dogs to bring enough food to this person to maintain this very unhealthy lifestyle? And I think the obvious conclusion is that in many cases, it's a function of food stamps, welfare, disability insurance, all that kind of stuff that supports these lifestyles and increases the incidence of obesity. And I would say, in a parallel way, drug addiction in American society. So I have a personal experience this year that really demonstrated that. If you listen to my show, you'll know that this was just a devastating year for my family. And I don't want to get morose. I don't want to talk too much about the sad stuff, but we lost a lot of people this year. And one of the losses was one of my sisters who died of a drug overdose in July. And I don't need to go through all the blow by blow, and the details. I'm happy to. I don't mind sharing it. I asked my mom if she minded if I shared it. She said it's fine. As my mother's philosophy is, if it's true, say it. So as long as I keep it true, Mom, I know she listens. If I get anything wrong, you can give me a call. 404-872-0750, 1-800-WSB-TALK, or tweet at me. Mom's not going to tweet, but you can tweet at Monica Perez Show. So I just want to, with my sister's story, there are a couple of elements that point out what I'm trying to say here about how the government enables. And with her, so much of her story is like straight out of the propaganda memes or whatever, the agenda serving memes. She had back pain. She actually had a pin in her back. She was addicted to painkillers. She was also addicted to heroin. She was an alcoholic, all this stuff. But and ultimately, heroin laced with fentanyl killed her. But how she lived this lifestyle was very heavily dependent on the government. She did not work, hadn't worked in a long time. Her methadone program was subsidized by the government. Her government insurance, Medicaid or Medicare, whatever it was, paid for her to take taxis to methadone. She had, paid for her doctors to get her pills. And ultimately, the heroin that killed her was paid for by money that was direct deposited into her account by the government, who was well aware at that time of what her situation was and that she was really on the verge of self-harm there, whether intentionally or not. So for me, like in the state, without that, the welfare state, the safety net that provides and all these facilitating policies they have is what is called in economic circles and libertarian circles and elsewhere a moral hazard. It creates a problem. It creates a moral problem. That's not necessarily the intention of the policies, but it creates the problem. And that's what I think in part, or maybe first of all, needs to be addressed. But even with all of this, even with my mother, who has now buried 2 people to drug-related death, 2 children, 2 of her children, my brother and my sister, she will always say in the end, free will? You got free will? So she describes herself as libertarian, and I think she really lives that because she recognizes that it's a personal choice. This is what a sticking point is, that it's hard for the government to say they can use violence for drugs because it is a personal choice. And they need this drug war. It really justifies a lot of the surveillance state, a lot of the police state. Terrorism is taking its place a bit, but a lot of that stuff, just the door was opened in the drug war to government overreach, no-knock raids, all that kind of stuff. So I've noticed lately, and in Trump's speech this week, he actually said, this is not a victimless crime. And he talks about how babies are born addicted to drugs. And I noticed this fentanyl stuff, apparently just being near it is enough to kill you. So now law enforcement is in danger. So these are innocent bystanders. Then yesterday, I think I saw the pièce de résistance, the most obvious example of like they're innocent bystanders. Binkley, do you have handy that headline I tweeted. I don't want to get it wrong. Lay that on me.
The headline is Puppy Revived with Narcan after eating discarded opioid.
Right. So I read that on WSB. I also heard it on Fox. There's this adorable, adorable puppy, like a yellow lab puppy, which is like as cute as the puppiest puppy you could possibly ever see. And this cute, adorable puppy nearly died because it sniffed fentanyl in a discarded cigarette package, which fortunately its quick thinking owner got it to a vet, and somebody figured out that this puppy needs Narcan, and then the puppy was revived. But the point is, this kind of theme promotes the idea that it's not a victimless crime. And when I see that kind of stuff, I can't help but feel there is an agenda at work. And maybe they just exploit these crises. I am always down the rabbit hole. I feel like they manufacture these crises or facilitate them. So I want to talk about the agenda, but if you have an insight, if you have a personal experience here that you want to share, maybe set me right, set me straight. Maybe I'm missing something. I have some criticisms of my own position that I will share with you. 404-872-0750, 1-800-WSB-TALK, and you can tweet at me at Monica Perez Show. Right after the break, I have someone who actually does have a constructive bit of advice about relevant to the crisis. So hang on for that. This is Monica Perez.
Monica Perez on News 95.5 and AM 750 WSB.
37 degrees outside the studio. Skies are hazy. Weekend weather is brought to you by Shoemate Heating and Air. We're talking about Trump and declaring the opioid crisis a public health emergency. And I'm sharing a story I think is relevant, and I'm interested in your stories. 404-872-0750, 1-800-WSB-TALK. You can tweet at me at Monica Perez Show. I am going to my sister, Franny, is on line 6. Hi, Fran. How you doing?
Good, Monica. How are you?
Good. We were just talking for people who just joined us. One of our sisters died this year in July of a heroin overdose laced with fentanyl. And in her case, she was actually, and this is very, very common, she was clean. She was in a facility against her will, I might add. We can get into that a little bit later, the libertarian take on that. And they released her, and she immediately went and got heroin, which ended up being laced with fentanyl, and it killed her. So I only have about a minute, Fran, but I know that you had, through your the work you've been doing kind of in the aftermath of this, you've found out something that might be helpful to people who are in a similar situation. You want to tell us?
Yeah, I did. I was looking for some answers, and I discovered that there's this promising tool that's available to the people on the front lines and addicts in crisis. It's called Vivitrol, and it's a once-a-month non-narcotic, non-addictive, injectable medication that completely blocks the opiate activity on the brain. So if someone's clean, they have to be clean for about a week. But if they are injected with this, it really cuts down the relapse rates, everything. They just don't even have the desire to do it. So I was wondering why, maybe if there's a conspiracy or something, but why wouldn't this be more available? Why didn't I even know about this? I mean, it sounds like it's something that should be pretty commonly used if the opiate problem is as terrible as we actually know it is.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. I actually do think that there are kind of sinister motives behind some of these developments, but that's an interesting thing if people are interested in that. Vivitrol, I think it's called. And I also had a helpline number, 1-800-662-HELP. That's 4357. Because you do need help, and that's where the libertarian angle gets kind of interesting, because can you use the government to do it? Isn't that really force? That's what they call a competing rights issue. I want to get into that, but Cliff, Jill, they're going to share their stories. 404-872-0750, 1-800-WSB-TALK.
Monica Perez on News 95.5 and AM 750 WSB.
Every American should know that if they purchase illegal drugs, they are helping to finance some of the most violent, cruel, and ruthless organizations anywhere in the world. Illegal drug use is not a victimless crime.
That was President Trump this week announcing the opioid crisis as a national health emergency. And I found that clip interesting because he points out the violence inherent in the drug trade, but it's not inherent in the drug trade because pharmaceutical companies don't have that problem. It's inherent in black markets. Black markets for anything are marked with violence because they cannot use the legal system to resolve disputes. You can't go to the courts if there's fraud. You can't sue them for tort for accidental drug overdose because you can't find them because they're not in retail establishments because they're on the run. I went over it a little bit earlier in this show, and if you want to hear the whole show, go to, we'll post it in a couple of days on propagandareportdaily.com along with our other podcasts. But so I'm not going to go through all that. But another thing about this clip that was interesting to me was that Trump emphasizes that this is not a victimless crime. And there's another clip where he talks about babies being addicted. We were talking earlier about a puppy who needed to be revived by Narcan. Like, there's clearly a big push to get us to believe that it is the government's business to protect us from the violence, the death, the danger of the drug trade of drugs, of illegal drugs, even if we're not involved in it ourselves. It can reach into your community and nab you. And that's important because people are starting to get sick of the drug war. And you can see that with the legalizing pot movement, which I also feel like is a double-edged sword. As a libertarian, I'm not advocating that drugs be illegal. I'm just saying you got to watch out because George Soros is funding the legalized pot movement. There are a lot of corporations who are going to benefit from it. Tax revenue goes up, and I think it really neutralizes the political power, the cognitive thinking, the influence, the effectiveness of the youth who tend to be idealistic and activist and all that. So I do not advocate drug use. I don't advocate the drug war either. But the reason, so people are getting sick of it. Now, in order to get you to think, so it's like the war on terror. In order to justify invading Syria, we have to experience terrorism here. And a lot of the terrorism plots were actually facilitated by the FBI. You know, this is in the New York Times. This is in the Record. Fox showed it too. So what they do is they make sure that you feel like it's self-defense to justify it. And they really need to continue with the drug war. There's black operations money comes out of it, as we saw with Iran-Contra. But really, it's just used to justify, just like the war on terror is used to justify the police state, the surveillance state, curtailing the Bill of Rights, no-knock raids, a lot of things that building the wall. Trump, I noticed this for a while now, is using the drug war as a reason to build the wall. That wall might end up keeping us in. I mean, if you're down the rabbit hole as far as I am, you know how bad things can get with a government that's increasingly totalitarian, as ours is. So I think that they're really doubling down on the drug war, and they want us to think that we are justified in this because we can be touched by it. But I say, as a libertarian, the only reason these negative effects happen is the nature of the black market, not the nature of drugs per se. But I want to know your experiences. What I did also say earlier is that this has touched my family in many ways. We've lost several, I think 6 people to heroin-related deaths. I 2 siblings. I have cousins, in-laws, really in my family. And this year in July, my sister died of a heroin overdose of heroin laced with fentanyl. And that's like, the fentanyl is the thing that people will pick up and cops will smell and OD. That's the thing that endangers innocent bystanders. And we were talking earlier about a puppy who was revived by Narcan. It so feeds into the memes. Binkley, do you have a tweet for me? I think we had a tweet in response to that little story about the puppy.
Yeah, the originalist tweets, the ODing puppy story is a joke, right?
Yeah, it seems like a joke because it's so propaganda. You know, it's like the opposite of atrocity propaganda. Like you look at that cute puppy with his little Band-Aid on his paw, and you're like, oh my gosh, we need to have a drug war. That puppy's so cute. It's just manipulative. It's just emotional. But there are real questions here. Like with us, my sister was so far gone. She had been using drugs for so long that we really had to debate whether it was okay to commit her. And that, as a libertarian, is a real question. You know, do you let people who are really at that point mentally incompetent, people like that, or Alzheimer's or children or whatever, just roam around freely in the name of liberty, or are there limits to that? I'm interested in that, and also in your stories, to the extent you can give us some insights. 404-872-0750, 1-800-WSB Talk. You can tweet at me at Monica Perez Show. I'm going to Cliff in Marietta. Hi, Cliff. You're on with Monica.
Hi. I just want to tell you thank you very much for your insight into this, because there's so many people that just don't have a clue.
Yeah, it's hard to get your mind around. I try to think of, like, where is it even coming from? Why is it such an epidemic in the richest society that ever existed? Why are people giving themselves mental illness, which is what this is? You know, it's self-induced mental illness.
Well, I'll just be brief with my story. My daughter got involved with just opioids about 5 or 6 years ago, and when we discovered it, and when she had sort of like a church background, so she was willing to, you know, work with the program to get straightened out and everything. So a couple of years later, they tightened. I guess she was still trying to sneak and take different stuff. And then she had turned to heroin when I guess they dried up a lot of the opioids as far as being able to get to the market. So she got caught, thank goodness, by the police. And so she got in a different program, and they told us about something called Vivitrol. I heard you mention it a minute ago on the air. Mm-hmm. And so I read all of the things online about it, and I thought, my goodness, you mean there's some kind of hope for when you get hooked on heroin and stuff like that? So she had great insurance where she was working, and she was able to get Vivitrol shots. And they would come like once every 30 days or 35 days or something like that. And it was just really a ray of hope. And then her insurance company, I guess because of the cost of them, stopped giving her the shots and stopped paying for the shots. And I was in shock to find out that when she started paying herself to get on them, that they were like $1,200 to $1,400 a piece.
Yes, that's what my sister just sent me more information on that. Yes, isn't that crazy? I mean, it's interesting because is it considered a mental illness or a disease that the insurance should really be paying for that? For sure, the cost to her, you know, how'd she manage? Did she manage without it?
You know, 5 months, taking those shots for 5 months. And she came to me and she said, Dad, you know, I don't have that craving anymore to do this. Now, she's got in a couple of things like Celebrate Recovery and drug programs like that help her maintain. But I could not believe that the price on that. And so when Trump made this statement about all this drug money that was coming in, I go, oh my goodness, they're going to be able to subsidize the cost of Vivitrol. And through the studies and finding out about it, it's still going to stay the same. And
yeah, well, I know my sister who called earlier, my family's from New York. They are working with one of I think it's a state senator, Carlucci, who wants to make it part of the government program to make sure people are able to get on this stuff. But as to me, as a libertarian, I'm always conflicted because do I want to have the government pay for this stuff when, you know, to me, it's not a government issue, but it really hits home, you know, when you think about what is the real solution here. Because my sister died, you know, like she died. So it's all nice to be theoretical, but could we have helped her in some way? And if this would have helped, she was getting disability anyway. She was getting Medicare was paying for methadone anyway. They were paying for a taxi to go to get methadone. You know, is it against my principles to say, you know what, you could shift the money from that to this? You know, maybe it is worth it. But anyway, thank you so much for sharing your story. And I hope she stays on the straight and narrow. I am under the impression that these these groups, the support groups, can be very effective, like from AA to maybe your church groups or whatever, where other members will be there for you 24/7. I mean, they take it. Recovering people, helping other recovering people, really take that seriously. I do think that if that's something that works for you, those people are dedicated. I am going to go to Jill in Cumming. Jill, you are on with Monica.
Hey, Monica.
Hey, Jill.
I'm going to try to get through this phone call because this is my daughter died just a little over a month ago, and we found her, and there was a bag of heroin and a rolled up $5 bill, and she died right there behind a desk, and we found her because nobody could reach her, but she had been battling this since at least 2008 when we did an intervention and got her into a rehab, which she broke the rules, got kicked out, went to another rehab, broke the rules, got out, got with her boyfriend, got pregnant. She had a daughter before that. So she's left 3 beautiful children. And I'm here to tell you this is definitely not a victimless crime because she has devastated all of us through this whole ordeal. And I'm sure you're aware of it, going through it with your sister.
And I would like to ask you, I mean, you're not alone. And do you have any insights? Is there anything that you would say you think that you could have done or anyone could do? Because I feel like I don't know if I have any insights into what is really an answer here.
There is nothing else we could have done. Every time we tried to help her, she would, she acted like she wanted to have help. She was a living contradiction of life because she would say, all I ever wanted to do was be a mommy, and all I want is my kids, and all I want is this, and then she would act like she was straight, and then she would go hawk everything to get drugs. And it just, every time you started to trust her, she would betray everyone.
Yeah, that is a very common thing. They're deceptive, and also they're conflicted. It's like the devil has a grip on them. I have to go to a break, Jill, and I would tell you to hang on, but I'm going to let you go because it's difficult and painful. And I really appreciate your sharing the story, and I think we can continue talking about this a little bit because this is not an unusual story. And yes, the family does suffer greatly. So give me a call, 404-872-0750, 1-800-WSB Talk. You can tweet at me at Monica Perez Show.
Monica Perez on News 95.5 and AM 750 WSB.
50 degrees, the forecast high today, I would say, if we're lucky. 38 low overnight. Weekend weather is brought to you by Shoemate Heating and Air. And I am going to go to Alex in Atlanta. Alex, you are on with Monica.
Hi, how are you?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm all right. I just wanted to comment on something, having to do with, laws on drugs, pertaining to drugs, and as well as Trump's declaring the opioid epidemic a national emergency. I used heroin for many years. I started out being prescribed oxycodone for herniated discs in my back. And the DA got involved, and they offered, more like forced guidelines on the doctors, forcing them to limit the amount of time you're able to be prescribed to something, as well as other things, enforcing laws on pharmacies, making it harder for them to dispense the drugs. Well, once you've been prescribed to a decent enough dose for a while, you're going to become physically dependent. Whether you're abusing it or not, you're going to be dependent on it. And when the government basically forced me to be taken off without really being weaned, I went to heroin, and I used that for 5 years, and I found getting off was extremely difficult. And they declared the opioid epidemic a national emergency, but the problem I see is that they don't offer any means of getting off to people who are really, neck deep in it.
Yeah, and actually, I do find that some of their policies, you got to wonder, if you go down the rabbit hole like I do, sometimes I think they create these addictions on purpose because there's so much political power to the drug war, from the money to the police state. I want to keep talking about this. Matt, hang on. He thinks the drug addiction is a mental illness. I want to explore that. 800 WSB Talk, or you can tweet at me at Monica Perez Show.
This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill. The story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to be. You take the red pill. You stay in Wonderland. And I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
There is a hospital nursery where 1 in every 5 babies spends its first days in agony. Because these precious babies were exposed to opioids or other drugs in the womb, they endure nausea, pain, anxiety, sleeplessness, and troubling eating, just the same as adults undergoing detox. Some of these children will likely lose one or both of their parents to drug addiction and overdose. They will join the growing ranks of America's opioid orphans. Such beautiful, beautiful babies.
This is Monica Perez, your libertarian voice on WSB, and we've been talking about Donald Trump announcing last week that the opioid crisis is a national health emergency. And if you know my show, I'm a libertarian, but I'm also an extreme cynic when it comes to party politics and any kind of policies that come out of D.C. I have to say, just like the news, cable news, 24/7 cable news, anything I hear out of those two outlets, I assume 90% of it, or first and foremost, I assume it's propaganda to serve an agenda that does not serve the purpose that they say it serves. However, the opioid crisis is real. Even if they manufactured it, it is real. And for me, I was sharing my experience. My sister died a couple months ago of heroin laced with fentanyl. She had pain and was an opioid addict and just a lot of things like that. But this is happening in the here and now. We had Jill called earlier. Thank you very much for sharing your story, Jill, about she lost her daughter who left children behind, saying that it is actually not a victimless crime. And so as a libertarian, I really always try to think about the right and wrong of government intervention, state power versus social power. And we do hurt each other. And do we have responsibilities? Do you have a legal responsibility to your children to take care of them? I don't think you can just abandon your kids. I think you go to jail for that. I don't even think you can give them to somebody. I think you have to, there are rules about how you deal with your kids, whether it's a drug issue or not. It doesn't have to be caught up in the drug problem. But Binkley my producer and I were talking at the break about, so for my family, for Jill's family, for some of the other families that are already in the throes of this, I don't know what the answer is. It's really difficult. And they really don't, it seems to be hard to get into a rehab center. They don't always have beds, and the success rate is so low. So I don't know the answer for that, but Binkley had a really interesting point about how our children are kind of teed up for addiction. I don't want to belabor that. I do want to hear your thoughts on that, though, Binkley, and I did want to hear, give me a tweet and then your thoughts, and then I've got some calls. So I'm gonna, if you're on the line right now, I am going to get to you. Let me just get through these other insights first. So go ahead, Binkley.
You have a tweet from Shieldy who says that he's blessed to be listening to your show right now.
Wow. That is an honor. I hope to earn. This is a little beyond this is outside my wheelhouse, as they say. I like analytics, I like math problems, the occasional crossword. But this stuff, these really emotional and nuanced things are a little harder to get through. But I think it's good for us to stay. You can talk about policy and politics all day long, but the reality is our real obligation in this world, our real purpose is to take care of our families, to live the best life you can, to kind of fulfill this purpose as a human being, which is a noble calling for anyone, no matter what your occupation or your status in life. We have the same nobility. So it is important to address these questions. But in a nutshell, Binkley, can you tell me what you were saying about how you can not to brainwash kids about addiction, but what was your insight? Help me understand.
Yeah, I don't think it's about teaching them about the content of addiction. I think it's about teaching kids how to make and break and recognize habits, because we live in a society where we're trained to just give in to every temptation on demand.
And we're rich enough that we can overindulge. If my kids had to do a lot of chores, I'm a stay-at-home mom, so I can do the chores, basically, outside of this. I can do the chores, and they kind of have freer time, so they can then spend a lot of time on screens, which clearly results in addiction. Even my son who has Down syndrome, he gets physical withdrawal symptoms. I actually had to take his laptop away, the poor kid, because he would, what we call Hulk out. He would just
I read an article that related what it does to their brains, how heroin affects people's brains.
I believe it. That I observe it because my family is so riddled with this addiction stuff. I can recognize it, and I see it in kids. My husband just bought a book. It just showed up, so I haven't even flipped through it yet. But I think it addresses this. It's called Glow Kids, and he heard good things about it. And but I feel like we do set our kids up for addiction. I got a tweet earlier that said, from sugar to ADHD medicine. But for me, I see it as the screens, especially. I mean, that it's just cannot be healthy. So it's good, I think, for us to take a step back. I do focus a lot on policy, but it doesn't have to be a policy. Let's just be aware. I do think it's a sinister plot that they bombard our kids with this crap that makes them incapable of functioning civilly, in a civic sense as citizens, whether it's drugs or the plug-in drugs or any of that. I do think they're neutralizing generation after generation increasingly, so we can't think anymore. People think it's chemtrails or fluoride. There's 1,000 ways, but there's some that you see in your own home if you just open your eyes. I think always that's the first step. But let's get to some calls. Thank you for that insight. I'm going to go to Matt in Duluth. Hi, Matt. You're on with Monica.
Hey, Monica. How are you today?
Good. How are you?
Good. First off, sorry for your loss. I wanted to say that right out of the bat.
I appreciate that.
I wanted to give you the point of view of somebody from the drug addict's perspective, because that was me. I, much like your other caller, started on a pain medication due to some injuries, and they did crack down. They did make it harder, and it sort of grew from there. However, I'm one of the lucky ones. I had access to really good treatment, really good doctors, really good facilities, and I had the help that I needed. Well, during that process, I wanted to go back to a comment you made earlier where you said, I think it was self-induced mental illness. So the way that I've learned through science and doctors and things of this nature is it's a brain disease from start to finish. So when you say that you can see some of these attributes or traits in, kids around your house and things of that nature, because much like my family, addiction goes down the gene pool and it runs in other people's families. So, I think you can see traits in it. Now, they may not be exposed as much as, people are probably exposed more nowadays, like you and your producer were just talking about, than they were 20 years ago. But on the political note, I think it's a lot like gun control. You can take the drugs away. Somebody's going to make some fake fentanyl and start selling it. You have to start treating the illness and the disease. You can't treat it's just like gun control. You can't take the guns away and expect people,
I do wonder about the illness disease thing. Like, I really struggle with this because I see it in my family. You can see addictive personalities or that gene. I absolutely recognize that. There's no question. But when it starts getting to the point, like my sister was on drugs for so long, I literally, like, towards the end, she was really never herself anymore. Like, she was not. She used to be a very rational person. She had so many great qualities. Sometimes these high energy, intense people are the ones who walk the edge or need more of that to calm down. You know, it's super tragic. But, like, I couldn't even reach her mentally at all towards the end, even, like, in the morning before her methadone. Like, she was gone. And it was true. Then at that point, in my mind, it was genuine, true. Even if she never did drugs again, she then had a mental illness. But I also think that these sometimes are the self-medicating pre-existing mental illnesses, and those are big problems.
Agreed. Yeah, definitely. So I think nowadays we have so many things that are instant gratification. You know, you can get on your phone and see what everybody's doing. You can, like you said, we are a rich society. You can go to the store if you're craving some sugar. You can do, you know, there's a lot of these things that are just available to us, and you don't have to work for anything. And a lot of these kids also don't know what the other side looks like. You know, they may think, you know, I have it hard, I need to self-medicate, like you were just saying. But really, you know, they probably have it better than anybody else on their street. So,
please, I know. I really
understand. Yeah.
I don't even like I used to think I wanted to live in the nicest neighborhood I could. Now I'm like, I want to live in the least nice neighborhood. I send my kids to a conservative Catholic school in part because it's humble. But I wanted to touch on something. I do have to take a break. David, Rick, hang on. I got to take a break, but I really want to talk to you. But what Matt was saying, there's something about building character and getting through challenges without these easy outs, without always trying to smooth the way for your kids. It's not easy to do because I do expect a lot from my kids. They do a lot of work, they have a lot of homework, and I want them to be happy. And I just think, oh my gosh, your life is going to be all work at some point, you know, enjoy now. But I feel like we have lost sight of what it takes really to build character. And that's the strength that you need to get through the tough times, that feeling of self-worth. That self-respect, I think, can help, maybe at least in the early stages. 404-872-0750, 1-800-WSB-TALK. David says that he is in chronic pain and wants to know what it's going to be like for those people when these prescriptions get harder. That's a real problem I want to talk to you about at Monica Perez Show.
Monica Perez on News 95.5 and AM 750, WSB.
High today at 50. Tomorrow's high 63. The weekend weather is brought to you by Shoemate Heating and Air. And we are talking about Trump announcing that the opioid crisis is a national health emergency. And I really feel like, although I'm cynical about anything anyone in government says, I do feel like this is a serious problem. I've been sharing my own stories and listening to yours, and I think we've gotten some fantastic insights. If you're just tuning in, you want to hear this show, my producer Binkley is going to put it up as a podcast in a couple of days on propagandareportdaily.com, along with all the shows and podcasts that we do. I'm going to take some calls, 404-872-0750, 1-800-WSB-TALK. You can tweet at me at Monica Perez Show. I'm going to David in Dawsonville. David, you're on with Monica.
Monica, thank you for taking my call. First of all, I take the mental illness part with a great offense. I have been going to pain clinics now for 16 years. I am on my second pain clinic for 9 years now.
Do you consider yourself an addict?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if I did not have my medication, of course I would be in trouble. I have 4 prescriptions that are narcotics I take monthly. I see a orthopedic surgeon runs my pain clinic.
And they don't have any other, they have no, I'm sorry if I offended you.
I've tried every alternative from lidocaine patches to tramadol, which is a synthetic narcotic, and none of the other stuff has worked.
Worried that they won't, you won't have access to it if they change the laws without thinking it through?
Of course.
Yeah. I do.
And I legitimately go to one. I have records. They had to pull all my medical records before they accepted me. It's not a pill mill. It is a legitimate clinic.
Yeah, I had a similar concern because I had a minor surgery once, but it really hurt. I was really in pain, and I called the doctor, and she said, I said, can't you give me some kind of pain reliever? She said, are you seeking narcotics? And I said, yes, I'm in pain from a medical procedure. Are you suggesting narcotics are only for recreational purposes? You know, what are you saying here? You know, she was not giving it to me when they were required, when they were necessary, what they are for. And that is a big problem with all these controls, is that they clamp down and they get it wrong a lot. 404-872-0750, 1-800-WSB-TALK. This is Monica Perez. Rick, hang on. You're up next.
Monica Perez on News 95.5 and AM 750 WSB.
I am your libertarian voice on WSB. Sometimes Saturdays 3 to 6, sometimes Sundays 1 to 3. I'm on 1 to 3 right now. And if you missed the show, looking around for it, want to know when it's on, sign up for Binkley and I have a blog, propagandareportdaily.com. If you can't remember that, you can go to monicaperezshow.com. But at propagandareportdaily.com, you can also get the podcast he and I do together, and the podcasts of this show. So it's a good resource. It's free and commercial free, which I love. That's a courtesy of WSB. I appreciate that. And also a courtesy of WSB is the weekend prize pack. So let me tell you what it is. We have 4 passes to see 20th Century Fox's upcoming film Murder on the Orient Express in theaters November 10th, and a family 4-pack of tickets to an Atlanta Gladiators home game at Infinite Energy Arena. First to call 404-741-0750 gets the prize pack. So we have been talking about the opioid crisis that President Trump announced as a national or a public health epidemic this week, and this has touched my life. It's touched so many lives. I feel like everybody's family's been touched by it one way or another. I did get some tweets saying my family hasn't, which I was happy to hear, because to me, my family's been. I mean, we've lost numerous people to heroin overdoses specifically and other related things, but that's just been a problem in our family for decades, all during which drugs have been illegal. The drug war has been on full speed ahead. Like, to me, the drug war is definitely not working, and I don't think we need to take this crisis and say government is the solution, but I also don't want to oversimplify and just say, well, I just know the black and white answer. Ideologically, I'm a libertarian, no government. I mean, this is a problem, a social problem, a family problem. I think our sick society starts at the top with the shadow government behind the scenes. I think they manipulate these social conditions on purpose. But that doesn't mean that we can't handle it or deal with it or try to help our own children, even, the little children who maybe you want to not have them addicted to screens. Maybe that is a gateway. I don't know. But I feel like good common sense and eyes open is a great first start. So, Binkley, why don't you read us some tweets?
All right. I have one from Rob, who tweets, the drug problem is a ploy to weaken our society to be sheep rather than individuals.
I totally agree with that. I think having the drug war doesn't mean that the people behind that don't know darn well we're still doing tons of drugs. And even legalizing pot, which I'm absolutely for. I don't want any kind of regulations or taxation or anything. I want people growing it in their backyards. I don't want it to be pushed by corporations or pushed by the government because they like the revenue. None of that. It's a weed. You can grow it. You could probably grow it without Roundup. It's probably better for you if you grow it in your backyard. However, when you hear like people like George Soros are behind it, or there's big money in these pot growing businesses, you have to wonder, is it about that? Is it about corporate money? Is it about dumbing down society? Is it about warehousing underemployed youth so that they don't take to the streets for any kind of activism? I'm not talking about the made up activism that hits the cable news 24/7. I'm talking about people really being awake being aware. That's why I think they gave out the Obama phone, so that people would not really wake up. They could be subject to the propaganda, in this case, subject to their wits being dulled. So I'm not in favor of drugs, but I'm not in favor of the drug war. But I want to, I'm open to, something I said just lit up every single phone line. I hope you're great and not, let me tell you something, honey. Let's see. But Rick's been waiting a long time, so we're going to start with him. Rick, you are on with Monica. Hi, Rick. How are you doing?
Hello, Monica. Thank you for taking my call, and sorry for your loss.
Thank you.
Personally, I'm a Gulf War veteran, and also in the civilian world wound up receiving an injury to my back, and was prescribed opioids for well over 6 years. And the thing was, it did lead me to other drugs. That once that was cut off, I wound up having to find something else to help relieve the pain. And I've been clean for almost a year now, which it's not an easy thing to do. It's a daily battle. But I never had the access to rehabs, and where I live in the country, there's none of those support groups that you could call on people. And
even through the VA, Rick? The VA doesn't have anything?
Where I'm at, no.
Not really.
And it's, sometimes some of these programs do have benefits. I don't consider myself a libertarian, but I enjoy listening to your show to hear the different perspectives from different types of points of view. And thank you for your show. I've been new to listening to it here over the past month and a half, and it's enjoyable. But it's sometimes people really do want to stop, and they have a hard time. And if they don't have that support group, they have to rely on their own will.
Inner strength. And I'll tell you, Rick, this is the one thing that has always just broken my heart for the addicts in my family, is that this crutch, however it entered their lives, often from pain, is the thing that they go to when they need a little something extra. And here you're at this point where you have this terrible battle to overcome. And the thing that has helped you through your struggles is the thing that you can't go to. I mean, to me, it's a very difficult thing. The supports, I do feel, I have noticed that does work. I mean, do you feel like your, family or community, is there even just not as a formal like drug support network, but just as a we believe in you and are there for you kind of support? Do you find that that's available to you or helpful to you?
It is, absolutely. I've recently, 4 years ago, met a woman, and I've had a few relapses between then and now. And the fact that she still is standing there beside me is also what drives me on every day.
Yeah, I myself find that it's essential to have that self-respect, to understand that you're a creature composed of body and soul, made in the image and likeness of God, if I remember my catechism correctly, that we really have this nobility that we should respect, and that the people who love you can help you understand. I personally find that gives me strength. I don't have that struggle, but for me, I have a son with Down syndrome. It's been difficult to... you get tired, you got to do the right thing. You got to live up to your responsibilities. And I think that even if it's not a formal thing, that's where your strength lies. So, so do you feel like you're going to make it? Or what are you going to do? Right?
Oh, absolutely.
Give us hope.
There's no way I'm going to go back to that.
Yeah.
And it's because of that support from my family.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you so much for sharing your story. I really appreciate it and I've loved the calls on the show today. Really, I highly recommend, if people have not heard the whole show, to go listen to the podcast, because this is what I was hoping for people. If we can talk about it, there's so much that we can do, or at least think about it clearly. And I know Rick was saying he likes the libertarian angle. It's not, definitely doesn't give you all the answers, or it's sometimes not the practical answers that you need. But this is social power, which is a libertarian answer. This is, looking at yourself as someone who, the government doesn't have to provide the answers because you yourself or your community has its own strength, which I think we're often led to believe is not true. Andy in Cartersville, you are on with Monica.
Hello.
Oh, Cartersville. Sorry. Are you not Andy?
Hi, Rick. I believe in you.
Yeah, I know. I'm so happy.
And I'm sorry for your losses.
Thank you. Yes, it's so many people.
Nancy has never, when Nancy Reagan started the war on drugs, never will work. Never has going to work. Never would work.
And then they would get on the radio. I remember when I was a kid seeing the governor of New York get up and say, "Man, we've got to beat this crack stuff. It's cheaper and better than Coke. Who could resist it?" He might as well.
When
you know what I mean?
When I started that Coke and all that stuff, there wasn't no crack around. It was just, late 70s, early 80s, and it might have been around, but we didn't do it. My thing is, earlier in your show, at the beginning of your show, you were talking about government enabling.
My sister, every step of the way, everything that happens to her.
No way to monitor recipients?
Could the government monitor for drug use? There are proposals out there that people have to take drug tests in order to get government funding, but I feel like that the government wants. This is where I'm down in my rabbit hole, because I feel like their policies, they say it's unintended, but we were telling them, we're like, she has money in the bank. You keep putting money in her account. You're going to release her. You've cleaned her up. She's going to take that money and do heroin and die. And she did. We said she'll be dead within 24 hours. I think she lasted 36. She was in a government
food
facility.
Stamps, public housing. I mean, they're just enabling people to do that stuff. They could spend the money if there was a monitoring recipients thing on more broader thing like Rick is going through in a rural area where he doesn't have the help. They could put more help out there in the rural areas. Rick, if you're still listening, 2 people can make a meeting.
Oh, yeah.
2 people can go to their neighbors. Their neighbors can go to neighbors. You can start your own thing. The best way to help yourself is by helping others. That's anonymous, a 12-step way.
Yep.
The best way to help yourself is to help somebody else get off of it. You're already clean, keep going for it. But the best way to help yourself is to help somebody else. And you'll feel better about yourself. You'll feel more clean. But anyway, the government enabling, and I think, get the government out of it.
Yeah, see, that's the thing.
It's never worked. It never has done.
And I would say that if you can say, well, we should monitor the housing, we should monitor the money, we should give them the drug tests or whatever. Not, you didn't say that part. But for me, it's just like the wall and immigration, everything. The problem is not they can't figure out what to do. In my opinion, the problem is that our government is a pathocracy. It's like doesn't work for us anymore. And it doesn't want to figure out what to do. It works hard to give us these problems so that we need them to intervene, so that we are kind of kneecapped, so we are disabled. I don't think they want to solve the problem, which is why they create the problem. And if you dig into these policies, so many times they create the problem. So it's not a will. It's not trying to figure out the right answer. It's realizing they don't want to help you. So yeah, get them out. I have time for one call after the break. This is Monica Perez.
Monica Perez on News 95.5 and AM 750 WSB.
Frost expected tomorrow morning. That's Monday, with a forecast high of 63. So it's going to get a little bit warmer as the work week begins. Weekend weather is brought to you by Shoemate Heating and Air. And we are wrapping up our show today, which was a little bit of a departure. We're talking about the opioid crisis in kind of real life terms, not just theoretical Russia did it, which you're hearing all over the place. This is real. This is stuff that we all have to deal with. And if you want to hear the show, if you just tuned in, you can check it out on our podcast, propagandareportdaily.com. But I've got time for one more call. I'm going to get Lisa in Dunwoody. Let you have the last word. Lisa, you're on the air.
Hi, good afternoon, Monica. Thank you for your call. For your show. This is more than coincidental. I'm literally sitting in my car. I just left the hospital. I don't know whether my son's going to make it or not. The bottom line is up here north of Atlanta, whether these people are fighting the same battles, years and years of heroin abuse, the fentanyl, and my son is fighting for his life right now.
Can you tell us your son's first name and maybe people can pray for him?
His name is Nick. And the bottom line of it is that we have gone through the court system. We've gone to drug court. We have gone through what they call court-appointed druggie rehabs, which are just nests of bees of people who abuse and try to sell to people that they already know are users. This is something that is prevalent that's going on in Atlanta. I was disappointed. I'll touch on politics with regard to, I'm glad that it was acknowledged by Trump that we do have this epidemic, but on the other side, there's no funding for it.
Yeah.
Insurance companies, even through Obamacare, don't want to cover.
Yeah, they don't. And I unfortunately, it's the end of the show, Lisa, and we should pray that this is a wake-up call for your son and that he comes through this and some good comes out of it. I really feel for you. It's let's pray for Nick, and there's a helpline for those of you out there who don't know where to turn, 1-800-662-4357. Maybe they can have a better experience than Lisa and Nick did. This is Monica Perez, back next week, Sunday, 1 to 3.